The observation deck of the Dauntless was a wide crescent of reinforced glass, giving an unhindered view of the stars. Commander Elias Vey had stood there longer than he intended, his reflection faint against the abyss, waiting for the first glimpse of the alien fleet. Reports had filled the last weeks with rumor and panic. Massive ships, weapons that bent physics into obedience, voices carried across systems as if distance were nothing. He knew those weren't exaggerations. They had already burned 2 colonies to ash. He turned at the hiss of the doors. Lieutenant Arya Cade entered briskly, dark hair pulled tight, uniform immaculate, but the strain in her eyes betrayed a sleepless night. "They've crossed into range," she said, handing him a slate. "For dreadnoughts, each the size of a city." Elias scanned the data, feeling his jaw tighten. Humanity had been in space for less than 3 centuries. They were skilled, yes, inventive, yes, but beside the Dominion, they were children holding slingshots. "And they didn't bother sending an envoy this time?" he asked. "No." Arya's voice was sharp, brittle. "They think we're beneath negotiation." That was the truth cutting through every intercepted broadcast. To the Dominion, humans were an anomaly. No heritage in great councils, no ancient lineage of conquest, no towering legacy. Just upstarts who spread faster than they should have. Colonized with stubbornness that bordered on defiance. Elias had seen the transcripts himself. The pharaohs will bend or be broken. He set the slate down and clasped his hands behind his back, steadying his breathing. Fear was present, yes, but so was a clarity that fear sharpened. The officers under his command needed more than numbers. They needed conviction that this stand mattered. The deck vibrated softly as the Dominion fleet decelerated from faster than light. The vessels appeared like black leviathans against the backdrop of stars, layered armor gleaming, weapons arrays bristling. Even silent, they radiated contempt. "Open a channel," Elias said. Arya hesitated. "They won't answer." "Then they'll hear us anyway." The comm system pulsed with his voice. "This is Commander Elias Vey of the United Terran Navy. You are entering sovereign space. Withdraw, or we will respond." The Dominion answered only with the slow, theatrical deployment of their weapons platforms. The signal from their ships was a blunt message broadcast in 100 frequencies at once. Surrender or extinction. On the bridge below the deck, technicians scrambled. Orders flew. Shields rose. Rail cannons spun to life. But against 4 dreadnoughts, the defenses of the Dauntless and her escorts were little more than theater. Arya's jaw clenched. "They'll crush us in minutes." "Then we make those minutes count," Elias replied. He saw her eyes flicker. Fear, yes, but also something like pride. Humans were strange that way. They knew when the numbers were hopeless. Yet they fought as though defiance itself could bend probability. The Dominion's first strike came without ceremony, a lance of searing light that carved through vacuum, hammering the shields of an escort frigate. The ship bloomed silently, fragments scattering like sparks in the void. Gasps echoed through bridge, quickly choked down. "Return fire," Elias ordered. Rail cannons thundered, streaking tungsten slugs toward the nearest dreadnought. The round sparked harmlessly against layered shielding. It was expected, but the act itself mattered. Humans answering giants with grit and steel. Arya's console blinked with a burst of data. "They're scanning us, dissecting our comms, our language." She swallowed. "To them, we're already specimens." "Then let's give them something worth studying," Elias said. Another salvo rocked the Dauntless. Bulkheads groaned. Sparks showered from an overloaded panel. Yet the crew moved with unbroken rhythm, every order executed, every station manned. That resilience, the refusal to falter, was what Elias believed the Dominion never understood. A message arrived, sharp and cold, translated by their systems. "Cease resistance. Compliance will preserve some of your species." Elias looked around at his crew, their faces pale but unyielding. He imagined the billions on Earth, on Mars, on the far colonies, farmers, engineers, children. If humanity bent now, it would bend forever. He keyed the comm, "This is our answer." The Dauntless dove forward, not retreating but accelerating toward the enemy line. Alarm klaxon screamed. Dominion weapons lit the darkness. Arya stared at him, stunned, You're charging them? We're showing them, Elias said evenly, that humans don't kneel. The ship shuddered under barrage, hull plates buckling, alarms cascading. Still they surged closer, closing an impossible gap. Rail cannons blazed at near point blank, targeting not shields but sensor clusters, weapon nodes, weaknesses the Dominion had dismissed as beneath concern. And for the first time, one of the great dreadnoughts faltered. A barrage of human fire gouged a scar across its surface, disrupting its patterns, forcing it to adjust. It was not victory, but it was defiance that drew blood. The bridge erupted in a roar, not of triumph but of revelation. They could hurt them. Aria's voice cut through, fierce now. If they can bleed, they can fall. Elias didn't answer. His gaze fixed on the enemy ships looming larger, weapons realigning. He knew this charge would not last, that the Dauntless might not survive another volley. But the Dominion had just witnessed something they had not expected from a species so young, so fragile. The thought carried him as the next strike lit the stars. This is 1,000 words and ends at a tense, satisfying moment. Humanity's defiance drawing first blood, hinting at hope yet leaving the outcome uncertain, propelling the reader forward. Do you want me to continue Section 2 in the same style, another 1,000 words, with escalating stakes, or do you prefer I expand this first section closer to the 1,700-word outline before moving on? The smoke of ruptured circuitry still lingered on the Dauntless bridge, acrid and metallic, clinging to every breath. Emergency lights strobe red, painting faces in flickers of defiance and exhaustion. Commander Elias Vey braced against the railing, steadying himself as the ship trembled under another glancing strike. The Dominion dreadnoughts were regrouping, adjusting their tactics. They had been surprised once, but they would not be caught unguarded again. Lieutenant Aria Cade worked furiously at her console, fingers darting across the display. Sweat traced the edge of her temple, but her voice held steady. We've lost the portside batteries. Shields are fluctuating at 30%. At this rate. She cut herself short, unwilling to finish the sentence. At this rate, Elias applied quietly. We'll make them remember us. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried, anchoring every pair of ears straining in that tense chamber. The crew needed certainty, and if he didn't provide it, despair would. The Dominion ships advanced in perfect symmetry, their formations unbroken, their power unchallenged. Yet Elias had seen the hesitation in their movements after the first strike landed true. It wasn't fear. Dominion doctrine had no room for such a word. But confusion. They had not expected resistance to sting. That confusion, however brief, was something humanity could wield. A transmission cracked through, harsh and deliberate. The alien voice filtered into a language humans could comprehend. You have demonstrated your futility. Further defiance guarantees extinction. Surrender, and we may preserve a fraction of your kind. The bridge fell into a momentary silence, heavy and suffocating. Elias saw the way some shoulders sagged, the way doubt hovered like a phantom. He would not allow it to root. Record my reply, he ordered. His tone left no room for argument. He stepped forward, gaze fixed on the Leviathans outside. This is Elias Vey of a United Terran Navy. Humanity does not surrender. We do not accept preservation as slaves or specimens. If you come for us, you'll find that every inch you gain will cost you blood and fire. And if extinction is the price of freedom, then extinction will not come cheaply. The channel closed with finality that felt like the turning of a blade. Arya exhaled shakily. You just condemned us. I just defined us. Elias corrected. His eyes lingered on her. When history remembers this day, they won't recall our weapons or our ships. They'll recall that we stood. Before she could reply, her console flared with urgent readings. Incoming swarm. Hundreds of drones detaching from their carriers. The view outside confirmed it. A storm of smaller craft swarming like a tide of metal locusts. Each drone bristled with weaponry. Precision-guided, built for overwhelming speed. Against them, the Dauntless looked like prey cornered by wolves. Elias issued orders with clipped precision. All squadrons launch. Concentrate fire on their vanguard. target their coordination relays if possible. Human fighter craft streaked into the void, smaller, lighter, far less armored than their Dominion counterparts. Yet they danced with a reckless grace, pilots banking through impossible turns, improvising maneuvers that no rigid Dominion doctrine could anticipate. The swarm descended and chaos erupted. Area's screen lit with trajectories, kill counts, losses. "They're adapting," she warned. "They're learning our moves." "Then change the dance," Elias replied. He leaned over her station, pointing at a cluster of Dominion relays that pulsed faintly in the data feed. "If we break those, the swarm stumbles." She hesitated only a heartbeat before redirecting commands. Fighters wheeled mid-combat, shifting targets. Explosions flared against the stars as relay nodes ruptured, scattering fragments like embers. The drones faltered, their perfect choreography slipping into disarray. Cheers rose on the bridge, brief sparks of relief amid the inferno. Elias allowed himself no such luxury. "How many did we lose?" Arya checked, her lips pressed thin. 37 ships, over half our squadrons. The number settled like lead in the air, silencing the bridge again. Each lost ship meant lives extinguished, dreams severed, families left waiting for voices that would never return. Elias bore the weight quietly, his face unreadable. He turned toward the viewport, where Dominion dreadnoughts loomed still untouched, their vast hulls blotting constellations from sight. This wasn't victory. It was survival, bought moment by moment. Then something shifted. A Dominion vessel, perhaps irritated by the delay, angled its main batteries toward the Dauntless herself, power built in its core, radiating energy that made every sensor shriek. Aria's voice trembled despite her control. "They're charging a full annihilation beam." Elias's mind raced. Their shields wouldn't hold. Evading would expose the remaining escorts. Options narrowed to one. He steadied his tone. "Bring us about, directly into their line of fire." The crew hesitated, disbelief rippling through them. "You heard me." Elias pressed. "Closer is safer." The Dauntless turned, engines howling, driving forward into the teeth of the storm. The Dominion weapon fired, a torrent of light lancing space. But at such proximity, angles mattered. Elias had calculated trajectory, and the beam skated across the ships, shielding instead of piercing its core. Systems screamed, metal warped, but the ship endured. At the same moment, the Dauntless unleashed everything it had: rail cannons, missile bays, energy torpedoes. Point blank at the dreadnought's exposed weapon array. The explosion tore through armor, ripping a fiery wound across the Titan's flank. For the second time, humanity had made the impossible real. The bridge erupted again, louder, fiercer. Not relief this time, but fury transformed into hope. Arya looked at Elias as if seeing him anew, her voice fierce and low. "They can bleed. They can break." "Yes," Elias said. His eyes, though, remained fixed on the other dreadnoughts maneuvering into formation. "But they're not beaten yet." Alarms flared again. Reports streamed in. The Dominion was preparing a counteroffensive, their discipline unshaken, their numbers still overwhelming. Humanity had drawn blood, but now the wrath of giants bore down upon them. Elias let the moment stretch, feeling the gravity of what was to come. The crew waited, breath held, eyes on him. He could sense their fear, their courage interwoven with it, a thread stronger than steel. "Signal all ships," he ordered finally. "Prepare for the storm. We'll show them what humanity is made of, even if it's the last thing we do." The Dominion fleet closed in, relentless and vast, their shadows swallowing the stars. And in that encroaching darkness, humanity's fragile light burned all the brighter, daring the void itself to smother it. That's just under 1,000 words, carrying Section 2 through escalation. The Dominion's overwhelming power, humanity's ingenuity, their bloody resilience, and ending on the precipice of annihilation with a call to defiance. Do you want me to make Section 3 also around 1,000 words for balance, or should I stretch it closer to the 1,600-word mark outlined earlier? The Dauntless drifted in the shadow of giants, her hull scorched and trembling from each near miss that raked across her battered frame. The Dominion fleet moved with chilling inevitability, dreadnoughts pressing forward as if nothing humanity attempted could alter the conclusion already written in their minds. Every screen on the bridge flashed warnings, and every officer knew their chances were measured in heartbeats, not hours. Yet none abandoned their posts. Commander Elias Vey stood rigid at the center, his silhouette lit by the glow of failing monitors. His knuckles were white on the railing, but his voice, when it came, carried the steadiness of a man who had already faced death and refused to bow. Status. Lieutenant Arya Cade's eyes scanned her failing console. Shields failing in multiple sectors. Engines at 40%. Weapons reduced to forward batteries only. Her throat tightened. We can't keep this up. Elias studied her, not with reproach, but with the calm weight of someone who saw in her words not weakness but truth. Then we change what we're keeping up, he said. Another blast hammered the hull. Sparks cascaded from overhead wiring. The bridge shook as though the ship itself were screaming. Yet Elias barely shifted his footing. His gaze locked on the largest dreadnought, the flagship, its hull marked with sigils of dominance. He knew instinctively that if humanity's voice was to be heard, it had to be directed there. We strike the flagship, he said. A murmur swept the bridge. It was suicide, everyone knew it. Arya's voice trembled with incredulity. With what? We don't have the firepower left to dent its hull. Elias turned to her, his eyes alive with a spark that cut through the despair. Then we use what they can't anticipate. The Dominion valued order, predictability, doctrine. Every battle they fought was a display of overwhelming might applied with mathematical certainty. Humanity's strength lay elsewhere, in improvisation, in daring, in the willingness to risk everything on a chance. He leaned over Arya's console, pulling up the schematics. The fusion core, he said quietly. Her eyes widened. You're suggesting? Yes. We use the Dauntless herself as a spear. We drive straight into them, overload the core, and carve a wound they'll never forget. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Every officer understood the cost. To follow meant death, without question. Yet in that silence, resolve took root. One by one, crew members looked up from their stations, nodding, jaws set, eyes burning. They were not surrendering. They were choosing their ending. Arya swallowed hard. If this is the path, then I'll see it through with you. Elias offered the faintest nod, not a command but a respect. Then let's make history. The engines howled, driving the Dauntless forward. The ship lurched under the strain, systems crying out as power rerouted from what remained of the shields. The Dominion dreadnoughts shifted formation, weapons swiveling to annihilate the lone vessel racing toward their heart. Beams lanced out, slicing across the void. The Dauntless weaved through the storm, her frame tearing, decks rupturing, lives extinguished in bursts of fire and steel. Still she pressed on, propelled by something the Dominion could not quantify. On the bridge, alarm shrieked, panel shattered, yet the crew held their ground. Arya's hands flew across controls, pushing the reactor into overload, her face a mass of both terror and determination. Elias stood unflinching, his gaze never wavering from the enemy flagship. At the final stretch, when destruction was certain, the Dominion fired a broadside meant to end it. But the Dauntless twisted, engines flaring in a maneuver no Dominion commander would ever dare. The beam grazed instead of pierced, and the crippled vessel slammed to the dreadnought's shielding, burying itself like a blade into armor once thought impenetrable. The impact reverberated like thunder across the void. Systems on the Dominion flagship flickered, stunned by the impossible. Arya looked to Elias, her voice barely a whisper. Core critical. 10 seconds. He gave her a single nod. No words of farewell, no speeches. The moment itself was enough. The explosion tore open the night. A star was born in miniature, a bloom of light and fury that engulfed the Dominion flagship, rending its hull, shattering its pride. Shock waves rippled through the fleet, scattering formations, unraveling order. For the first time in countless campaigns, the Dominion knew disruption. In the aftermath, silence fell across the void. Where the Dauntless had been, only debris glimmered, drifting like embers from a pyre. Yet the image of what had occurred spread faster than light, broadcast captured by every ship, every station, every witness. Humanity had stood, bled, and fallen, but not before striking the unthinkable blow. The surviving Dominion ships did not advance. They held position, their formation fractured, commanders locked in debate. In their doctrine, resistance such as this was an anomaly. An anomaly demanded caution. Back on Earth in the colonies, in the far reaches where news traveled with agonizing delay, the name Dauntless would become a rallying cry, not for victory, but for defiance that refused erasure. Aria's last thoughts, as the light consumed the bridge, lingered not on fear but on what she glimpsed in Elias's final stare. Not despair, not rage, but the quiet certainty that humanity had just declared itself to the stars. And though the ship was gone, though its people were ash scattered into eternity, the echo of that declaration remained, impossible to silence, impossible to ignore. The Dominion had sought compliance. Instead, they had found a species that would rather burn than kneel. The war was not over. It had only just begun. That's Section 3 in 1,000 words, closing the arc with humanity's sacrifice, the Dauntless final charge, and the HFY theme. Humans prove unique not through superior weapons, but through unyielding will and unpredictability. Would you like me to stitch all 3 sections into a continuous 3,000-word story draft so it reads seamlessly like a novella, or keep them separate for now? The wreckage of the Dauntless drifted in silence, fragments glinting like scattered jewels against the black canvas of space. The Dominion's flagship, wounded and listing, bled fire from the scar carved into its hull. Around it, the rest of the fleet lingered in hesitation, their formations loose, their precision undone. For the first time in centuries, they did not advance on their prey. Far below, on the moon of Illith Prime, a listening post had captured the final broadcast of the doomed ship. The officer stationed there replayed again and again the defiance in Commander Elias Vey's voice, the impossible strike that shattered a vessel thought untouchable. Word traveled fast, carried on encrypted channels, smuggled aboard civilian freighters, whispered across colonies where fear had once ruled. Humanity had lost a ship, but gained a legend. Admiral Mara Solene stood in the command hub of Earth's orbital defense ring, watching the raw footage relayed from scattered allies. She was a tall woman, her hair silvered at the temples, her expression carved in iron. Around her, officers spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting to her for direction. The Dominion would return. That was inevitable. But now, the calculus had changed. "They'll come harder next time," said Captain Dre, his voice low, almost reverent. "They can't allow this kind of defiance to stand." Mara nodded, but her gaze was distant, fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "And yet they hesitate. That is our chance. Not because of the damage we did, but because of what we showed them. They don't understand us. That ignorance is our weapon." The command hub hummed with activity. Maps of sectors lit the walls, dotted with colony positions, trade routes, and estimated Dominion deployments. Humanity's defenses looked like scattered embers against a rising tide. Yet, in the Admiral's mind, those embers might be coaxed into flame. She called up the surviving crew of the escort ships that had witnessed the Dauntless final charge. Hollow-eyed men and women appeared on the hollow feed, their uniforms scorched, their voices ragged. One spoke above the others, a young pilot named Rennick. "We saw them bleed, Admiral. I swear to you, they're not invincible." Her eyes softened, just briefly. "Hold on to that truth. Spread it to every corner you can reach. Our people must believe it before our enemies do." Even as she spoke, she felt the weight pressing in. Elias Vey had lit a fire, but now she was responsible for keeping alive. A martyr's death could inspire, but without strategy, it could also fade into myth, a story told while the species burned. A fresh transmission interrupted her thoughts, a harsh Dominion signal captured by intelligence relays. The translation filled the chamber in cold, unyielding tones. "The anomaly will be corrected. The Pharaohs will be extinguished. Prepare compliance or perish." Mara silenced the playback, her jaw tightening. The room waited for her verdict. Fear threatened to creep in, but she crushed it beneath resolve. "They want us to believe this is inevitable. I refuse inevitability. She pointed toward the scarred map. Elias proved they can be hurt. Now we will prove they can be defeated. Her officers straightened, drawing strength from her certainty. Plans began to flow. Mobilization, fortification, desperate alliances. Humanity's technology was crude beside the Dominion's, but their adaptability had always been their edge. They would not match dreadnoughts with dreadnoughts. They would fight with asymmetry, deception, and the wild audacity that no Dominion commander could predict. Later, alone in her quarters, Mara studied the archive files of Elias Vey. She read his reports, his assessments, the last recorded moments before the Dauntless became light. She lingered on his final transmission. Humanity does not kneel. The words burned into her as both promise and burden. A chime interrupted her reverie. Aria Kate appeared on the screen, alive, though scarred, having been pulled from the wreckage by a recovery vessel that had risked everything to reach her. She was gaunt, eyes shadowed by what she had endured, but her voice carried steady. "Admiral, the Dauntless is gone, but its spirit isn't. Elias didn't just save us. He gave us the weapon they'll never understand." Mara inclined her head. "And what is that, Lieutenant?" Aria's lips pressed into a grim smile. "Our refusal. We'd rather burn than bow. How do they fight that?" For the first time in days, Mara allowed herself the faintest curl of a smile. She saw in Aria the same spark she had once carried, the same defiance now kindling in countless others. Humanity's strength wasn't in its ships or even in its commanders. It was in the unshakable will that each carried, a refusal to surrender even in the jaws of annihilation. The Dominion would return, vast and merciless, with fleets beyond counting. But when they came, they would face a species transformed, not cowering, not begging, but standing with fire lit by sacrifice. Admiral Mara closed her eyes, committing herself to the path ahead. She whispered into quiet, words meant only for herself yet carried by the echo of those already gone. "Elias, your fight isn't finished. We'll carry it forward." Beyond the viewport, Earth turned slowly, fragile yet unbroken, a jewel that no empire had yet claimed. The stars waited, filled with enemies and peril, but also with possibility. Humanity's story was far from over. It had only just begun to be written in fire. This is Section 4 in 1,000 words, continuing seamlessly from the sacrifice of the Dauntless, introducing Admiral Mara as the new central figure, showing the survival of Aria, and shifting the conflict toward the larger war of survival. Do you want to keep extending this into a serialized structure, like Sections 5, 6, etc., so it becomes a full novel-length HFY saga, or keep it contained as a 4-part arc?